Hey, what's up, everybody? Good to see you. Uh, what's up, Ron Newton? What's up, GQ? What's up, Just Haw? How's everyone doing today? Um, this is the first time I'm going to be streaming alone. I'm going to be reacting to a short video from this channel called The Curious Classroom. I think it's a primarily sociology channel. I watched it before reacting to it. I don't know if it counts as a reaction if you watched it already, but it was terribly bad. And the experience that I've had with mainstream sociology professors in the past have been some of the worst when it comes to their misunderstandings of Marxism and just the very vulgar understanding of what they think Marxism is. So I always have this story that I tell of this one sociology professor from when I was an undergrad. Very early in undergrad, I hadn't read enough Marx, and just the sort of stuff that she said in class, I still dream about being able to go back there and respond to some of those things. So I'm hoping that this video will clarify some of the misconceptions that roam around in sociology departments for some of you. And hello, Freepa. Hello again, Ron. Hello, Eric Gray. Hello, Jacob. Um, so yeah, let's roll into our introductory video and then we'll start watching today's video.
Also realize that the problems of racial injustice and economic injustice cannot be solved without a radical redistribution of political and economic power.
Gosh, I love that introduction. There's something about the international. It always gets me pumped. It was sent to us by a viewer, and we love that someone took time out of their day to get clips from various streams to mash it up in a very uh, professional looking manner and to put the wonderful sublime international behind it, especially with the clip at the end from MOK. That's just perfect. Hello, Donovan. Hello, Freepa. Eating some salad while watching some Carlos. Awesome. It's always good to keep the body healthy, and I believe salad does that. How long has this been live? We've been live for 4 minutes, about to be 4 minutes. Okay. Um, will you be doing a solo reaction? Would I be doing solo reaction videos more often? It depends on how this goes. I was actually considering, since I've been teaching for about half a dozen years now, the history of Western philosophy. I've been thinking about at some point doing either very formal classes for our institute, stuff that like people can sign up for, and we can have like a syllabus, and people can turn in like papers if they want at the end, and we can do something special like getting the best papers and putting them out as student books and make that like a magazine or series, book series of sorts. I've been thinking either about doing that specifically with the history of philosophy, obviously from a Marxist-Leninist perspective, so I'd have a little bit more freedom in terms of the teaching than I do right now. I can't just spew kids with propaganda. But either that or I'd be doing it through streaming and I'd be interacting with your comments and your questions. So I don't know so far what I'm going to end up doing. I know that we're for sure going to be doing a class from our other editor, Noah Krashevic. He's going to be doing an intro to Marxism class pretty soon. We're actually working now on some of the advertisements for the class, and I believe it's going to be done through Zoom so that we can have as many students as possible. We're going to have people sign up. Uh, and Yeah, it's going to be a sort of testing ground for some of the stuff that we want to do more of in the future. Hopefully, develop something like a Midwestern Marx cadre formation university of sorts. But yeah, to get back to your question, this is the first alone reaction video I've done so far. Um, I don't like doing stuff alone. I like being able to bounce ideas off of other people. So please stay active in the chat so that I can continue interacting with y'all. And if at any moment, of course, you have a question, please shoot it in the chat, and I'll either answer it right away if it's somewhat relevant to the video, or I'll answer it hopefully sometime after. I just figured out this thing you could do, which is give a star to the comment, and it saves it on the side. So okay, yeah, sweet intro. Hello, Austin. Hello, Terry. Uh, I have homework from Business 101. Whoa, due tonight. Homework sucks. I don't like giving out homeworks. I wish that people would just like do the reading, show up to class, and talk. And the sort of assignments that I would give out would be like somewhat voluntary. I have the experience that when I'm forced to do an assignment, even if it's something that I already would have done had it not been forced, as soon as it becomes forced, you stop wanting to do it. And the one thing that I do not want to happen in like my classroom settings is for people to feel like forced or to be bored or to just reinstate some stereotypes about the uselessness of philosophy that just go around in quotidian society. I want philosophy to be fun, and I want the teaching to be fun, and I want people to be doing it for the sake of learning, not for the sake of like stressing out over assignments and grades and all that stuff. So um, yeah, I'm not a big fan of homework. I'm a big fan of people doing the reading, which is it's hard to get people to do. Smoking something good post 9/5. Yeah. Learning about how capitalism works. Uh, Hello, Chris. Hello, B4. I'm guessing that's how you say it. Are you telling me everyone hates authoritarianism? I don't know. It's an abstract word. It's the essence of it is authority taken to a certain extreme, and the question that would follow from that is whose authority and towards what end. These terms like authoritarianism or totalitarianism, they're like really abstract, and they've been used over the last century to equate communism to fascism, more specifically like Stalin era Soviet Union to Hitler. And in some ways you could trace it back to Hannah Arendt's text, The Origins of Totalitarianism, which the State Department had a role in funding. Um, a lot of the other texts from the left wing academics at that time were funded by the State Department and by the Congress for Cultural Freedom. Here we have Eddie in the chat watching some Carlos live while I cut weight. His weight cut has been just insane. He ran like 20 miles the other day. It was on some David Goggins shit. He burnt the ships. Okay, so we have to get started at some point, but let me go through these comments. What has helped you in your readings? I have always struggled getting time to read theory. Actually, and this might be surprising for Eddie, because ever since we've known each other, I've always been like a nerd when it comes to reading. I try to get at least 100 or so pages in a day, unless I'm like writing. I usually do a little less. But I think the first book I ever read was in undergraduate, maybe junior or senior year. I hated reading. I was always like doing good in math and some other things, and I was ahead in school growing up, but I hated reading because I never grew up in a reading environment. So how did I go from like hating reading to like a person that has to read a lot? If not, they get this like sense of guilt inside them. It was just by reading. I remember when I first started, I was like, okay, I have to read. I can't be someone that likes philosophy videos, likes philosophy, and doesn't actually read it. So I remember I started by like telling myself, okay, I'll start with 10 or 15, and then I'll keep going up 5 and 5 and 5. And as soon as you're able to get in like 15 to 20 pages, that's pretty much all you need. Because what you do is not like sit down for 6, 7 hours in a row, but the way that you get a lot of reading in is by doing a lot of short periods of reading. And of course, you need time for this, but if you get even like 4 sit downs of like 40 minutes or an hour where you read 15 to 10 to 20 pages in that time, that accumulates over the whole day, and then that accumulates over the whole week, and eventually you're reading 2 or 3 books a week, and you never feel like the reading is strenuous, which is what happens in those first few days where you're or first week where you're trying to adjust yourself to reading 15 or so pages. um, as soon as you start getting like bored or you start getting mentally tired, just stop, because once you're mentally tired, if you keep going, the reading is not going to be quality reading. You're not going to remember the stuff. You're not going to learn it. It's not going to help you reflect on the material that you're reading. So I would say, usually the first week of you getting started reading is the hardest. But there was another tendency that I had, which was I wanted to wait for like the perfect time to read so that I can take the best notes. And that's a big mistake that people encounter when they start reading. Read all the time, read anywhere, whenever you can get some reading in, get it in. And that's going to accumulate over time a whole lot more than you waiting for the perfect time to sit down for 2 hours and get tired in the first 20 minutes or something. Um, so that would be my best tip. I'm watching this as I'm writing a script for a TikTok I'm making where I go through the first chapter of Parentes, Black Shirts and Reds as a part of a series I'm making on the app dedicated to the book. That's pretty awesome. Please do send us over those videos. It might be cool to share them on our YouTube. I know that when we first started our Patreon, we would do this thing that I thought it was pretty awesome, but we never had any time, um, and Eddie was the one that ended up doing it the most, and he started to not have any time either. But we used to meet with our Patreons and do book club discussions like twice a month or something. And I think we did Black Shirts and Reds either once very slow or twice, because I remember we stayed on Black Shirts and Reds for quite a while. But it's such a fundamental book. It's like the within the first three that I usually recommend people. Uh, watching Carlos cutting cheese and grinding this week's Nightfall and Destiny. Don't understand the second part of the statement. I do the first. We have to carry the boats. There you go. So is Goggin the one that says carry the boats? There's one that says like burn your ships. You gotta. They tell a story of of some ancient society where they went to war. The ships were burnt so that the men didn't have in their heads the idea that they can just like quit. Um, and their only way of escaping was through victory. And there's a slogan that comes from these like motivational videos that's like burn your ships, basically give it your all. um, oh, we got a super chat here. What do you think about Adderall being forced on ADHD kids? It's an unspoken crisis. I was prescribed at the age 13. Yeah, it's pretty. I actually found out I was working on a paper on this meta study that had been done on serotonin not being like the biochemical, like the chemical that causes depression. There being other factors that influence depression, some social factors, some individual factors that are individualized after social interactions, a whole host of other factors that are not reducible to biochemical processes or biochemical things such as serotonin. And in the process, I was talking to my aunt, who's a pharmacist, and she told me that I had gotten prescribed that at a very young age, and that I had been diagnosed with ADHD at the time that I was like 3 or 4. It was as soon as I got here from Cuba. So, um, and it's very scary because a lot of these behavioral issues, they're really issues of environment. When you stick kids in environments that stunt their creativity, that stunt their longing to know, um, that just force very mechanical, conclusion driven education on them, I think that's what ends up making a lot of kids uneasy. And those same kids that are uneasy in some environments, you put them in other environments and they stop being uneasy. um, I remember in my, like, this happened to me for a very long time with like theology and philosophy of religion. And it was, primarily because I held on early on in undergrad to a very dogmatically atheist view. I was on the Sam Harris train, which was, it was very cringe and politically reactionary. I didn't know they were politically reactionary. When I did, I I stopped listening to them. But um, I remember I would take my philosophy of religion class or my theology classes, and I was just so goddamn bored. I would take like some wine in a little thermal to get by class, and I look at my Snapchats from back in the day, and I have like the most ridiculous statements attached to the picture about how bored I was. But you put me in a whole nother class, and I was like the most attentive person in the classroom. And the same thing happens with Eddie. And we talk about this all the time because he's got ADHD as well. And when he tries to get that healthcare homework done, it's horrible. Like when I'm getting my phone spammed with like 6 audio messages from Eddie, I know he's doing homework, and it's just hard for him to concentrate on that. But then, the following day he has it free, and he's able to spend 7 hours straight reading Capital Volume 2, which isn't the most fun text to read. But when he's able to do something that he enjoys, something that he feels like allows the best of himself as a human being to flourish, he doesn't have the reactions to the environment that he has in other environments. So I do think that uh, part of the problem of the raise in diagnosis of kids with ADHD and the medicalization of these kids is that, one, it's very profitable to just have the solution be a pill that feeds into the medical pharmaceutical industrial complex that just makes trillions and trillions of dollars off of giving a bunch of pills to kids and to adults. Um, Another thing is that we want to have very uh, standardized behavior that doesn't interfere and make the environments that we're forced that are forced onto us by capitalism, that make them more comfortable to navigate. We don't want like kids running around because they're bored in a place where they shouldn't. And it's also inconvenient, for for the parents whose lives are also being made miserable by capitalism. Okay, he was actually carrying a boat somewhere. Mm-mm-mm. Part one, where I go through the preface, is already up. And thanks for reposting, Comrade Eddie. Awesome, awesome. Okay, so let's get started with this video from, again, the Curiosity Classroom, which has 2.1 million views. 2.1 million views. Uh, and it's extremely wrong, as I hope to show within the next, I don't know, 30 minutes or so. It's called A Brief Introduction to Marxism. So let's get started. Let me know in the chat if you can hear this well. Let me move the comment down. By the way, thank you, GQ, for the super sticker. I really appreciate that. We really appreciate that, and it's your donations which allow all of us to work. It's what allows us to keep up a publishing press and to do all these exciting projects that you know are really done for the sake of constructing socialism in our country. So an investment in Midwestern Marx is an investment in the struggle for socialism. Okay, let's get started.
Marxism is a theory based on the ideas of the philosopher Karl Marx. Marx was born in Germany in 1818 and died in London in 1883. He's buried in Highgate Cemetery in North London. Marxism is what is known as a conflict theory because it states that society is in conflict with each other, and Marxism claims that this conflict is between the rich and the poor. Now,
Oh man, already it hasn't been 30 seconds. It's been 32 seconds actually, and I already have quite a few problems with it. First of all, it's reducing Marxism to the analysis of society, and this is something that might be true for Western Marxism, who reject the role of Marxist, i.e., that is dialectical materialist analysis of nature. But it's not true for how Marxism is understood in the rest of the world. In China, they're trying to figure out how to develop a Marxist analysis of literally every aspect of study, whether it's the study of nature, the study of society, the studies of accounting. It doesn't matter what it is. They're trying to see how it is that the dialectical materialist framework can improve the understanding of those areas and make those areas more efficient. So this reduction of Marxism to just a theory of social conflict, I think that's already incorrect because it's much broader than that. It's a philosophical worldview that seeks to understand in as concrete a form as possible nature, society, and thought. So not just social conflicts. The other part of it, let me go back and replay it.
and Marxism claims that this conflict is between the rich and the poor. Now, Marxism is
This is like the archetype of just the very vulgar understanding of class that you get in the academy and in other places in regular society as well, and as we can see here in the media. Marxism doesn't say that the main struggle is between the rich and the poor. Rich and poor are categories that are connected to the sphere of circulation. The analysis, the central analysis of Marxism is the struggle between class, and classes are defined according to specific groups' relationship to production. So this presupposes the sphere of distribution, but you can have, theoretically, or in practice even, a capitalist that's broke, and you can have parts of the working class that are living relatively well, and that would still make the capitalist who can, at times make less than the worker, perhaps in another industry, that would still make him a capitalist and the worker a worker. So when you look at class from the sphere of income distribution as just the rich and the poor, I mean, it might be good rhetorically, like if you're trying to mobilize people and you just divide it into this crude bifurcation of like rich and poor. But for a video that's supposed to be introducing Marxism, that from the get-go is incorrect. The analysis of class is centered on production, and when you look at just rich and poor, you're looking at distribution. And now, of course, the relationships that exist in the sphere of production do usually reflect themselves with certain patterns in the sphere of distribution. It is more almost impossible for it to be the case that a working class person is rich. Just like it is almost always the case that a capitalist is rich. So it's not that there isn't, a high degree of correspondence, but that the analysis is focused upon the sphere of production. When you focus upon distribution, like for instance the Occupy Wall Street movement, the 99 versus the 1%, it's a good slogan. It might help mobilize people, and insofar as it does, go for it. But it should be kept away from scientific analysis of society, because it's only quantitatively different from the liberal understanding of society and the liberal understanding of class, which is based on income categories. The difference is that when you say the 99 versus the 1%, or the rich and the poor, you're only subjecting society to two income classes, whereas the liberal might be more fond of subjecting it to three: the rich, poor, middle class, or upper middle class, lower middle class, and all these different categories for class understood from the framework of income distribution, or in other words, understood from the framework of the moment of circulation, which in every instance presupposes the moment of production. And if you're looking at the moment of circulation in a way that's not grounded in an analysis of how that's a reflection of the moment of production, you are really just looking at an effect and treating it as a cause. Okay, let's keep this going.
As we understand it as sociologists, is a political and economic philosophy, a view of the way things are now, and suggestions as to where society is headed. The danger is that we start to view it based on what we
It's not just a political and economic philosophy. It's extremely useful in the analysis of nature because it's an all-encompassing worldview. There's an example that I often use. You wouldn't trust the judgment of a boxing judge that got to the ring on the 12th round. And we understand that you wouldn't trust that judge because we know that in order to understand the whole fight and to judge it properly, you have to look at it as a comprehensive whole. You have to look at the interconnection of each round to the other. You have to look at the fight itself as a development, and you have to look at how the whole fight gives meaning to various rounds, and how the relationship between various rounds allows you to give meaning and to understand the totality of the boxing match. And this is something that people understand because of common sense. Like if a judge shows up in the 12th round and then boom, the bell rings and they're like, this guy won because they won the last round, it'd be a joke, right? And most people understand this. Well, that method that I just explained previously of looking at things through the lens of totality, through the lens of how all variables within that totality and the totality itself is in a constant interconnection with everything else, and in a constant state of change and constant change and interconnection. That's the essence of the dialectical materialist worldview. And that helps you clearly understand better a boxing match. It helps you understand nature better. It prevents a lot of the mistakes that you have in bourgeois science, where things are reified, so they're taken away from their content and they're treated as this separate thing. And when you do that, you're performing a form of killing of the fact, because the fact is always present in the factors that allow it to arise. And if you take it away from those factors, you can never understand it. What you're understanding is an abstraction that you have separated from the natural environment in which it exists. So again, that works for everything. It's not just political and economic or politics, political economy.
understand about its relationship to communism and the politics and oppression of the old Soviet Union. Marx never saw communism in this way. He saw it as liberation and as a leveler, a way of creating a fairer society, and of a way of getting the best liberation and as a leveler, a way of creating a fairer society and the politics. The danger is that we start to view it based on what we understand about its relationship to communism and the politics and oppression of the old Soviet Union. Marx never saw communism in this way.
Ah, here we go. Here's the anti-communism. Um, so it is in part correct to say that Marxism it is wrong to understand Marxism on the basis of what we know about communism, primarily because what we know about communism is incorrect. Because the ruling class of the center of capitalist imperialism doesn't want the vast majority of its people, which are a part of the working class and which would benefit from socialism and which would be in awe at what socialist countries from around the world, from the Soviet Union to China to Cuba to Vietnam, what they've been able to construct for working people, especially starting at a starting point that was much worse than they are now. They would be in awe at that. So the ruling class has to lie about the truth. It has to spew propaganda, and it spends a whole lot of resources not only trying to ensure that the development of socialism abroad is as difficult as possible, so that the small failures that exist, they can pin to those and magnify them and define that experiment through the lens of those magnified failures. They have to do that in order to present an image of communism that's negative, because if they presented the truth even while trying to strangle these projects, it'd be overwhelmingly a vision of the world that working people in our country or in the imperialist core in general would favor. So it is correct to say that we shouldn't understand Marxism according to our understanding of communism, because our understanding of communism itself is based on capitalist propaganda that we must too dispel. And this goes not only for the regular American, the average Joe, but it also goes. This is something that that the Western left also has to do, because they've swallowed up a lot of the garbage that's been said about socialism for the last century, especially the projects that have been led by communist parties and that have been the most influential in creating global alternatives, such as the USSR and today China. Okay.
Marx never saw communism in this way. He saw it as liberation and as a leveler, a way of creating a fairer society and of a way of getting the best out of all people, not just those with money and power.
It is true that Marx sees the ultimate goal of communism as in a way that's very humanistic and almost in line with the Aristotelian project of human flourishing, except without the aristocratic tinge through which Aristotle formulates it. It is true that communism seeks to create a society where there is such material abundance that people can work because they feel that that work is their creative activity. That work gives meaning to their life. They feel like in the act of objectivizing themselves onto nature in ways that are often social, in ways that are imbued with aesthetic sensibilities in the sense of beauty. They the goal is to get to that point where people work because they want to work, and it becomes the purpose of their life in the sense of the project that helps them be fully human. That is, however, one understanding of communism that is brought up and is tied to the end goal of a classless, stateless, moneyless society where social interactions are unmediated. So there's no money; it's just the direct appropriation of the producers. However, there's other ways that Marx and Engels and Lenin and the classics talk about communism. There's communism as the dictatorship of the proletariat, which is, in other words, called socialism, which is understood to be a transitionary stage towards the higher uh, social stage that's called communism. And in this stage, the idea is that the state is transformed radically into a working class state. The bourgeois state is abolished because it's a state that uh, exists for the sake of keeping the supremacy of capital over labor. You have a proletarian state that's established, and it's used to suppress the interest of the old exploiting classes, which are obviously still going to be around, and especially in the youth of the socialist experiment with still quite some power. This is especially true, as we see in the 20th century, in the case of the need of a strong socialist state to defend the sovereignty of nations that have won the revolutionary struggles, defend them from imperialist hybrid warfare and imperialist aggression. So that's another way of speaking about communism as socialism or the dictatorship of the proletariat. And the last way, which I think is perhaps the most dialectical way of speaking about communism, and the one that we should always keep in mind along with the ultimate goal, is communism as the real movement of history which abolishes the present state of things. So this one is focused on how it is that the struggles now that you see take root in the mass of people in various ways, how do those struggles, which are adjusted to the context in which they take shape in, how do they discover of new forms of social formation which overthrow the existing state of affairs? So that would mean not judging, for instance, China according to this basically grocery list of things it has to live up to in order to be called socialism or communism, but judging China as a project that's actively abolishing the existing state of affairs, and in the process of doing so, discovering new forms of social organizations that advance and push history forward and progress humanity forward. And what Marx does with, for instance, the one project that he is able to observe, which is the Paris Commune, is precisely that. He looks at what forms it is that it discovers, and some of the ideas that he had about, for instance, the socialist state get transformed by his experience with the commune. And that's what we should be doing. We should look at how it is that the struggles for socialism in different countries discover different forms that we must study and incorporate into our analysis of the struggle for a post-capitalist socialist society. Okay, back to the video.
To really understand Marxism, we need to start with its opposite, capitalism. Capitalism represents the type of society you and I live in today. In Marxist terms, it's an economic system based on private ownership of the means of production. What this means is that our society today is based.
This is usually the definition that's used, and it's largely correct. But if we really want to get into the nitty-gritty of it, it's not just private ownership of the means of production. The individual producers under feudal society had private ownership of the means of production, but it was not capitalism. It was feudalism. It was a feudal system of production, because part of the essence of capitalism is that private ownership of the means of production continues as the means of production itself becomes more and more socialized. It's not just individual producers obtaining what Marx called at the end of Capital, the first volume, self-earned private property. So the private property that's obtained from your work, which is what most people think when they think about private property, or at least defend it. You know, the property, the thing, the object that you get after you finish working. He calls that self-earned private property. It's the private property that existed when private property was when the private ownership of the means of production was in the hands of the individual producer. But what's really special about capitalism, which is conjoined with the process that's Marx calls the so-called primitive accumulation, which is a process of enclosure and colonization. What's special about capitalism is that the process of producing itself becomes socialized. So people are not producing as individuals, they're coming together and producing as a social body, and that allows production to just absolutely take off. Right? It develops an emergent property. That means a property that cannot be reduced to any of the particular parts, but it's grounded on the assemblage of all of those parts into its own totality. So Marx gives an example in Capital of the fact that you can have, uh, 12 workers work for 12 hours, and then you can have one worker work for 12 hours for 12 days. But then you can have, you know, single workers working alone for 12 hours. The output that's going to be the highest is when you have the 12 workers working for 12 hours, because that process of producing socially allows for properties and for production to, develop into qualitatively something that's not just the sum of all the individual parts. The whole, that whole is larger than the sum of all of its parts. And that's part of what's special about capitalist private property. The fact that the process of production, and then the process of production is not only socialized, but as it develops, is socialized in ways in which within that social body, there's a more elaborate division of labor within manufacturing itself, within the production process itself. But as in the feudal order, the ownership and the accumulation is still privatized. And this is, Engels calls it like the second contradiction in Anti-Düring, which is the fact that you have privatized accumulation of socialized production. So in the feudal order, you have privatized accumulation of individual production. Capitalism, you have privatized accumulation of social production. Socialism, you have socialized accumulation of social production. That's the sort of historical dialectic. Each step abolishes something, but also raises something else to a higher stage. Private property in the feudal order is abolished in its individual producer form into capitalism, where production is socialized. And then the private accumulation part is abolished. The part that's retained and elevated is the socialized production, which would now be accumulated socially. Okay, that's a mouthful. You see, that's why I love streaming with someone else. The ability to have someone else talk, to help the bouncing off of ideas, and to not have your throat burn after 40 minutes of talking. That's pretty nice. I don't know how Eddie does 3-hour streams, but let's keep going.
Based on a few people who own factories, businesses, shops, and other corporations. These corporations aren't owned by the people who work for them, the employees, or jointly by the employees and the owners, but by the owners only. Marx was formulating his theories during the Industrial Revolution, a time when Britain and other countries were going through a very dramatic change. The old feudal system, when lords of the manor owned the land, meant that the ordinary people had freedom and rights to all land. It was held in common. When the government passed a number of enclosure acts in the 1700s and 1800s, ordinary people no longer had the right to live on this land, and many of them were forced to pack up and move to the towns and the cities, which were beginning to.
And a lot of times you could trace this process of enclosure actually even farther back than what Marx traced it to. Recent scholarship has unveiled that you could trace it even up to like the 12th century in various parts of Europe, and that means that this this description of the commons are enclosed, the people are thrown off their land, they're forced to go into the city to work in the factories, is for a very substantial period of time incorrect, simply because the factories and the cities as we know them haven't developed yet. So the question is, where the fuck are these people going? There's literally nowhere to go. So you have this immense pauperization, this immense, basically homelessness that's created as soon as capitalism develops. And the point is, what the hell do you do with this superfluous, quote unquote superfluous, what Marx would call relative surplus population, something fundamental for capitalism, creating extra people, wasting human capacity, right? As William Morris used to say, it's a system of waste. What do you do with them, right? So part of what was done with them was including them into the adventures of colonizing the Western world, um, the Americas. Part of what was done with them was enslavement. Marx talks about this towards the end of Capital, where if paupers were caught in various parts of Europe, they would be branded. If they had like three brandings, the person who caught them the third time can keep them as a slave. At times, if they were caught as paupers, they can be put in prison. So you have the development of a new sort of prison system that's qualitatively different from the ones that took place in feudal society. A lot of times they sent them to the insane asylums. So you have the development of the medical clinic and a different way of doing medicine and these large structures and new ways of dealing with mentally sick people, which were a lot of times just affected by poverty and driven crazy by the desperation that came with the social environment that they were basically thrown into because of the development of capitalism. In other areas, this surplus of people would be used as soldiers, which were fundamental for the military escapades of colonial powers. There was a variety of things that were done with them, from enslavement to insane asylums to colonizing the Americas, to soldiers, to a wide variety of things, to even killing at times if they were caught just being paupers, not being able to find work, not being able to have housing, not being able to really do anything. They were just killed. So it was an extremely brutal process that's a lot more complex than just they get kicked off the land and now have to go work 14 hours at a factory that's like a 2-hour walk there and back, and that's horrific. But the stuff that happened, in some estimates, for centuries before those factories developed, was also extremely crude. We have here a super chat from Sam Dixon, one of our most constant financial supporters. Thank you, Sam. He's also a YouTube member, which you can tell by his by the little thing next to his name. I'm trying to pull it up. That's why. Let me see if I can find it to pull it up so that I can answer your question. No, this isn't it. I am a tech caveman. One day I will learn how to not be a tech caveman. But for now, this is what you get. Caveman Carlos, Caveman Garrido. Which of Engels' two works do you recommend to read before the other? Anti-Düring or Dialectics of Nature? Cheers, Marxist philosopher named Carlos G. Thank you for the $5, Sam. Again, these donations are what keep our institute afloat. I would say Anti-Düring. Anti-Düring was considered for a very long time like the textbook of Marxism, and out of Anti-Düring, the last two sections basically, you have the little text, which is it blew up at its time and it's a lot more famous, which is Socialism, Utopian and Scientific. Dialectics of Nature was like Engels' magnus opus, and basically what for Marx Capital was, for Engels Dialectics of Nature would have been, but he wasn't able to finish for a wide variety of reasons. If you want to learn more about, Dialectics of Nature, I recommend a book from this, I believe he's Turkish, but he teaches in China, this philosopher Khan Kangal. The book is called Frederick Engels and the Dialectics of Nature. I did a very long review essay on the book, maybe a year or so now, which you can check out also at Midwestern Marx. it's under the same title, Frederick Engels and the Dialectics of Nature. Actually, let me link it real quick. But so I would definitely say that read Anti-During first, because that's like the closest thing we have to a textbook. Dialectics of Nature, on the other hand, is unfinished. It's a manuscript, and and let's see. Hold up, I'm typing. Engels. It's not only a manuscript, but it deals. It's much more technical. It deals with science and scientific developments at the time, and it's got a few good short sections on dialectics, but those themselves are unfinished. So yeah, anti-during would be my short answer. Start with anti-during. Okay, let's keep going.
To grow due to the increase in factories and textile mills. Whereas previously people were free to keep their own animals and grow their own crops on common land, once they reached the cities, they had to find work in the factories, in the employment of the factory owners. The work was hard and often dangerous, and the pay was very poor. Many factory owners didn't want to pay high wages because this would mean less profit for them, so children were often used as cheap labour. The Industrial Revolution.
I love how it's framed as like they didn't want to, you know, it doesn't matter what they want. It's a systemic necessity. Like the system says that they have to try to drive the cost of production down as much as possible, and what gets hit is variable capital. So, wage labor power is what gets hit, which means that working people's lives are made poorer and poorer and poorer and poorer by capitalism and the process of accumulation. It's curtailed at various times in history by the class struggle making victories, by at certain moments the state interfering in favor of the working class, or at various times capitalists not being full idiots and saying, okay, let's give some meager crumbs to working people, but very quickly they have to roll those back within some years, because the telos of capitalism, which is profit, mandates that. So you have this falling rate of profit, and you need to try to get profit from somewhere as prices continue to go down, and you get it by squeezing working people's lives more and more. Okay, that was.
Promoted a capitalist way of thinking, what we call a capitalist ideology, and also created two distinct groups. Revolution promoted a capitalist way of thinking, what we call a mean less profit for them, so children were often used as cheap labour. The Industrial Revolution promoted.
It's interesting that he doesn't talk about how it was that children stopped being used as cheap, super exploited labor, um, because it wasn't like the capitalists coming to their senses and saying, maybe using kids is kind of fucked up. We should, maybe not stunt their development as human beings and guarantee that they, die when they're like 40, 50, and that they have all their fingers chopped off by the time they're like 8. It wasn't that. It wasn't the capitalists coming to their senses and being, the least bit human. It was working class struggles which won the abolition of child labor, which won, later on the 8-hour workday, which won reforms that made the working conditions of working people a lot more bearable. And that's often left out, because in being left out, it leaves the people that have been, indoctrinated under bourgeois ideology, it leaves them with the assumption that what achieved this transformation was just the development of the conscious of the capitalist class, who came to their senses and did the right thing. Especially when like he's framing uh, you know the the cheap labor as something that was very much an individualized decision of the capitalist, and not a structural systemic necessity.
adopted a capitalist way of thinking, what we call a capitalist ideology, and also created two distinct groups of people. The factory owners, who were middle class, Marx called these the bourgeoisie, and the workers, or working class, Marx called these the proletariat. Marx was on the side of the proletariat because he saw them as being treated unfairly by the factory owners. Not only did Marx see
You heard that? Marx was on the side of the proletariat because they were treated unfairly by the factory owners. This is a video with 2.1 million views. 2.1 million views. It says the same thing that, like, Jordan Peterson and all these other idiots say. Marxism is just about siding with the little guy. And it's not that it's it's not that that's not a part of it. Of course, Marx was on the side of the proletariat. Of course, Marx struggled collectively with others to emancipate the proletariat from the unjust condition in which they existed, from exploitation, from oppression. Of course, that's all true. But the essence of it, the essence of why the proletariat is supported, and why the proletariat becomes so central to Marx's analysis of capitalism, it is because it is the class that produces surplus value. It is the heart of capitalist production, which means it is the heart of the whole social life that we've been living under for the last 300, 400, 500 years. It is the pressure point of the capitalist mode of life. And only through that class, in the areas where it is the producing class. In other areas, you have a different producing class, like the peasantry, right? And there, that's that and the proletariat conjoined end up becoming the revolutionary agents. But in the West, which is the main society, specifically Britain, the most advanced industrial capitalist society that Marx is analyzing, the proletariat is the essence because it is the class that produces surplus value, which means it is the heart of of profit and of everything in the capitalist mode of life. And so it is the revolutionary agent. And he demonstrates this in a very scientific manner so that, 200 years after, an infographic video ends up saying that, Marx saw these two classes and he sided with the proletariat because he saw them being treated unfairly. It's like, come on, it's what you expect, like maybe a fourth grader that's doing a forced presentation on Marxism to say. And this is a video, I just want to restate this. This is a video with 2.1 million views. 2.1 million people, the vast majority of them probably in the West, probably younger people who want to know what the hell Marxism is. They came to this video and they're being told a bunch of bullshit. A bunch of bullshit that is demonstrably false, and that anyone that has read even the slightest bit of Marxism would scoff at. Let's see what else this unbearably bad video has to say.
see them as being treated unfairly or being oppressed. He also saw the system as one that tried very hard to make sure that the poor stayed.
He doesn't mention exploitation, which is like the essence of it. And it's something that can literally be calculated. Like, you can calculate exploitation. You can see how much is being robbed from what the working class produces. And that how much is the surplus value. Out of that, the capitalist has the capacity to realize it when it's sold and get profit. That's a relationship which can be quantifiable and quantified, and that is quantified in capital. And that we can quantify it and show working people how it is that they're literally getting robbed, how they add value to what they work on, and they only get a very small percentage of the value that they added back in the form of wages, and that it's just enough sometimes to come back the next day and continue being exploited, continue being robbed of what they produced. That includes oppression. But it is not just oppression, it's exploitation. If you look at it from the standpoint of oppression, you're shifting the the terrain of debate to something that resembles more morality, instead of a thorough, rigorous scientific analysis of capitalism and why. If you look at these tendencies, the natural conclusion is that at some point society is going to erupt, as it has done in other modes of production in the past. Let's see what Sam Dixon. Thank you again for the $5, Sam. We really appreciate it. Author of the vid, The Curious Classroom, hasn't made a video in 8 years with a total view account of 3,473. Jesus, 3,400,073. 536. Makes random infographic psych vids. Sus. Yes, of course, sus. All these people have so much money behind their bullshit content because the ideas that they spew are the ruling ideas, and in every society, the ruling ideas are the ideas of the ruling class. Okay, let's see what else Mr. Curious Classroom has to say.
Poor and the rich continue to get richer. So Marxism views capitalist society as being based on a system that encourages inequality, because the rich will always need someone to do the work they don't want to do. It's called a conflict theory because society is in conflict, the proletariat versus the bourgeoisie. However, Marx also suggested that at some point the working class would realize that they had the power to.
It by doing that, it also feeds into another central misconception of Marxism, which is the one that the sociology professor I mentioned at the beginning. I still have nightmares about this. I want to go back so bad in time to just tell her something. Tell her that the thing she said was untrue. So we were doing, in sociology class, we had read a whole host of sociologists, and we were doing like a Sweet 16 bracket for the sociologists. And I remember we were in the last four, and the debate was for Marx, and I can't remember who else. But one of the people was this sociologist that talked about race from a pseudo Marxist angle, and her argument was that influencing the class, because it was supposed to be the class just doing the voting, but she stepped in and she was like, this person was better at looking at how society isn't just the working class and the capitalists, which is what Marx said it was. And I literally still have nightmares about this because she convinced everyone, and I was there like, no, I don't think that's right. I haven't been able to read a lot of Marxism yet, but I don't think that's right. I don't think someone as smart as Marx, who's dedicated so much to studying, would say such a demonstrably false thing. And the reality is that when you read Marx's political works, for instance, read the 18th Brumaire, it's a masterpiece. It's a goddamn masterpiece. He's talking about 7 classes there. And, it's not like he's talking about a distant past. He's talking about 1848 France. He's describing 7 classes, right? He's very clear that it's not the case that the only 2 classes in society are the proletariat and the capitalists. That's not the case. It is the case, however, that the central contradiction in society, the one through which all other contradictions are mediated, to use Mao's terminology, the principal contradiction in society, in capitalist society, is between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. That does not mean that there aren't secondary contradictions or intermediary classes that exist between the capitalist class and the proletariat that also engage in class struggles in ways often aligning themselves with the proletariat, and often not, often developing their own specific antagonistic relationship with the capitalist class in a way that's not aligned with the proletariat. So it's much more complex than just you have these two classes, one rich, one poor, one bad, one good. I mean, it's laughably bad. It's laughably bad and demonstrably false. Thank you, Comrade Ross. Ross, I don't know if I can mention this, but I saw that you posted something about the interview with John Bellamy Foster, helping you think through some of the relationships that you had with some of these philosophers before. And I gotta say, the one of the most, if not the most impressive character in a human being is having the openness to change their mind and not being dogmatic in their belief. It's something that every Marxist needs to have. Dogmatism is the death of thought. We need to be able to constantly reevaluate the things we believe, the things we have come through believe through our study of the world, and we need to constantly be reevaluating those beliefs, restudying the world, to see if the world has changed and if we require new conclusions to be correct. So, but it takes a very high level of not just political maturity but personal maturity to do that. So I was very impressed when I read your Substack post, and I think that's awesome. But thank you again for the €5.
To change things. Through education and personal development, some members of the proletariat would begin to understand the system better and devise ways of changing it. Marx believed that such radical change could only come about through revolution.
He has officially reduced Marxism to utopianism. The essence of the working class's struggle against the capitalists has very little to do with them being educated enough to devise, okay, your idealism, to devise a new society and then work towards it. That's what the utopian socialists did. They saw the contradictions in the society they existed in. They wanted to harmonize those contradictions, and so they devised a plan from their mind of a new society. That's not what the struggle of the proletariat against capitalism is. It's a very immediate struggle that, yes, involves the raising of the proletariat to a level of class consciousness, which means not just, I'm a worker. Every working class person understands that they are a worker. They understand that their boss is not their friend. A lot of them understand that their boss, and, in our context, that management is their class enemy. So that's not class consciousness, because if not, we would have the most revolutionary class consciousness in our country. So class consciousness is something more than that. It's an awareness of the historical character of these relationships and of the fact that they can be transformed through the revolutionary struggle of the working class for the conquest of political power. That's a higher level of class consciousness that goes beyond what Gramsci called the economic corporate phase, the phase of direct clashes in the workplace, and that leads to the moment where the working class can organize itself into a revolutionary vanguard that has ideological clarity, that trains it in a way in which it understands the system in a comprehensive and a dialectical manner, and understands in the process how to move forward, understands how to engage with other working people in a way that they're able to obtain their trust in this very scary project of fighting for an alternative order, which means that often the people doing the fighting or the people sympathetic to that fighting can lose their job, which, of course, under capitalism means losing your means of subsistence, the ability for you and your family to survive. So it's not an easy sell. But we need to be able to educate people in such a manner that they're able to articulate to their coworkers why, even though those immediate risks are at times likely to happen, why it is still worth fighting for a world in which working people are in control of the state, the social institutions of production, and they can produce in such a way that the surplus that's created gets reinvested into society. it's we have to explain to them why it's worth fighting for a society that works for itself instead of for a small group of people and the accumulation of capital in their hands.
Revolution, when the workers rise up and overthrow those who are treating them unfairly. In place of capitalism, a new system would be established in which all people were treated equally and all the factories and businesses were owned by everyone. In other words, they were communally owned. Marx called this system communism.
All right, so that was it. What do you guys think? I think again, that last statement I mentioned earlier, the three ways that Marx thinks about communism. The most immediate, communism as the real movement of history, which abolishes the present state of things. Communism as what we would now call socialism, so the dictatorship of the proletariat, a transitionary stage towards the ultimate aspiration, which we're all striving towards and will not see in our lifetime, or maybe even in our children's lifetime, which is a classless, stateless, moneyless society, free of exploitation, free of oppression, and in which there's such material abundance that people can work because it fulfills their uniquely human needs, because they can flourish as human beings through their work, and in which you have a condition where people are working and providing from each according to their ability and to each according to their need. And that doesn't just mean, their direct physical need as soon as you have enough to survive, that's it. No, it's however much you need in order to satisfy that which is required for you to be as best as possible in the thing in which you're striving to be as best as possible. So, for instance, part of what need I would have would be books, because I'm an academic. I need a whole lot of books. Someone else might be a chef, and what they need is really good pans and a lot of diversity of food so they can mix it up together real nice. That would be their need. It wouldn't really be mine. Maybe eating it would be nice, but it wouldn't be a need for me. So, yeah, this was my first experience streaming alone and reacting to a video alone. If you enjoyed it and you would like to see me do more of these, please let me know. If you have a video that you would like me to react to debunk or whatever, let me know through the Discord or email us at midwesternmarx@gmail.com. So some news, we have upcoming, hopefully sooner rather than later, Noah's Marxism 101 class. So we'll let you know as soon as you can sign up. I don't know if we're going to put a cap. I don't want there to be like 300 or something people in each class, because then it wouldn't be manageable. I would like there to be anywhere from 20 to 30 people so that the people there can interact in ways which are much more interactive than what you can get from like a stream. So that's the sort of classroom dynamic. I mean, classrooms are limited to 25 students, so anywhere from the 20 to 30 range, I think, would be good. So whenever we start letting people sign up, make sure to hop on that as quick as possible, because we'll probably put a cap. And then we're thinking about maybe when the class is done, uploading those, or maybe even live streaming them as we do them. We haven't decided yet, but that's an exciting development that we have coming up. Pick up my book, The Purity Fetish and the Crisis of Western Marxism. You can get yourself a copy at midwesternmarx.com/books, which I have just put it in the chat. And get a copy of the Journal of American Socialist Studies. You can find it in the same place. And all right, thank you for joining me tonight, folks, and I hope you all have a great night.
racial injustice and economic injustice cannot be solved without a radical redistribution of political and economic power.